let's chat about different types of coats for the dogs. I can't paint, this would be a really long class if I went ahead and painted every single dog and showed you, but I'm going to show you some popular fur types. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to cover every single kind of dog fur. My neighbor has one of those dogs with the dreadlocks. I forget what it's called, but that is a very unique dog, and unfortunately I won't be showing you how to do that as well. But hopefully from these different coats you can get a good idea of how to paint your own dog's coat. The coats that I'm going to cover are a shiny short hair coat. Think of dogs such as a Vizsla, Labradors, they have that kind of shiny coat to them. The multicolor coat, so Australian Shepherds, a lot of rescue mixed breed dogs, even German Shepherds in a way kind of have a mixed color coat. Then we have the long hair coat, the curly coat. Even though we covered that in our painting of May, I just want to do a little close up for you. And then last is the wrinkly coat. Think of dogs such as a Shar Pei or an English Bulldog where they have those wrinkles. I'm going to show you how to do those. The first one we're going to start off with is our shiny coat. Now, if you look at a dog with a shiny coat, there are clearly areas that are a lot lighter and a lot darker. What I recommend you doing is just mimicking what those light areas are. So I first put down a very light coat of the color of the dog. This dog is going to be more of a chocolate lab. And I'm looking at a photo, just drawing some of the highlights that I see. And they're never going to be perfectly straight lines. They're pretty soft. And this is going to look weird because you're not going to see the whole dog, but just follow along with me if this is your dog's coat. Then I'm going to grab a darker color and I'm just going to paint around that highlight. This bottom layer is a little bit wet still, and it's going to look a little soft because of that. I kind of recommend having your bottom layer be a little bit wet because it does help it soften up a little bit. And we're just coming in and we're painting around all of those shiny areas. It's going to look strange because we can't see the whole dog right now, but I promise you it'll make sense. You're gonna follow those, whatever the shiny layers are. Can you just lay down, please? My dog keeps walking around and I know that Skillshare is gonna get upset that there's noise in the background. Okay, like I said, I know it looks weird right now, but this will totally make sense for your painting. Wherever your dog has these shiny marks, just lightly draw them out. And if you feel as if the line is a little bit too harsh, just grab a little water on your brush and lightly blend it. And I would probably come in here again and I would do an even darker layer in some of these areas next to the shine. So let's say your dog's head is up here, there would be a lot more shadow right here. And you're just building on layers. Okay, so that's a shiny dog's coat. Our next coat is our multicolor coat. And the reason I haven't painted a bottom layer is because I like to put the spotting in on that first layer. I'm looking at an Australian Shepherd right now, and I would say the lightest color is gray. So I'm gonna paint the very lightest color. And I'm just painting a square to make it simple. You want this to be very light with a good amount of water, but not so much water that it's pooling, but you do want it to stay wet because we are going to come in and add in some color. The Australian Shepherd I'm looking at has some almost black areas. I would mix up kind of like a brownish blue color. And then I'm just lightly dotting that in. So some of them are a little bit bigger, smaller. And then the dog also has some brown. And I'm gonna grab that and just lightly tap in. Again, I'm working in a square just to show you guys the simplest way. But this is how I do dogs that are have multiple colors. This, doing it while it's wet, helps it to soften up so it looks more like fur. Otherwise, it just looks really harsh when it's already dry and you're trying to put in those dots. What I would also do is some of these areas I would make a little bit darker based on my dog's fur, and some of them would be lighter. But keep in mind that this is wet, so it's going to spread. Okay, so that's kind of the Australian Shepherd's fur, and you can always blend it in a little bit depending on what your dog's fur looks like. After this dries, I would come in again and I would put maybe some little lines for fur marks, just really light, but that has to happen after it dries. If you do it right now, it's just gonna blend in. But that is how I work with dogs who have a multicolor coat where it kind of all blends in. I work on that first layer using a wet on wet technique. Next, we have the long hair coat, and I am looking at a beautiful Sheltie. I'm sorry I can't share these pictures with you guys. There's not a lot of photos that are royalty free, but you can of course pull up a photo yourself on Google. I now have a darker color on my brush. I'm actually gonna grab a smaller brush. I recommend using something either a 2, a 1, or a 0, depending on the size of your painting. But this is really simple. You're just coming in and you're making these long lines. And what I like to do is press down for some of them and lift up. And then some of them I'm just using the tip of my brush. And I'm making the hair kind of cross over itself in some areas. Some areas are going to be darker, lighter, depending on the color of your dog's fur or hair. I don't know, whatever you call it. But I always recommend having your base layer down and having it dry first. And then you can go in and put all these really long, beautiful strands of fur. Because it's never going to be white underneath, unless for some reason your dog does have like brown hair on top and white underneath. There's lots of dogs in this world. Okay, that's how I do the longer hair. If you want to add another layer of dimension, I would let this dry, come in again with possibly more saturated color to add more depth and shadows. Next, we're moving on to our curly hair dog. We did do a curly hair painting already with May, if you followed along with me. But if you want another example, I'm going to give that to you right now. With the curly hair, I like to have a base coat in the lightest color or the lightest version of your dog's fur. And for these, I'm actually going to grab a smaller brush again. I have a 3/0. And I just make these little half circles or like C's, but I'm never making them all go the same way because that doesn't make sense. It's never like that. If you look at your dog's hair closely, it's some go this way, some go that way. And I like to come in and blend some of it. We're getting the texture. Some of these are more saturated, some of them are lighter. Like I said in the videos prior, we're not looking for a 100% realistic painting. We want it to look like our dog, but we're taking some artistic license and we're just wanting to add texture to the fur. Make sure you're kind of bouncing back between the darkest, absolute darkest shade that you see in your dog's fur and the lightest. And that's how I do the texture for the curly hair. Just those little C curves going this way and that way. And then I come back in with some water and just kind of blend some of it around. Okay. And lastly, we have the wrinkly coat. And the wrinkly coat, you need to come in and make those lines. I should probably pull up a dog. I have a really wrinkly dog on my computer right now. So you want to make those lines so you know what they look like. You have your base layer down and you just want to come in with a darker layer because this will be the shadow and go over these lines. And what I like to do is grab just a little bit of water on my brush and then lightly blend in those lines. Making sure to leave some areas with that lighter color showing through, because that's showing that there's depth. I'm not sure how popular these kind of dogs are, the Shar Peis. I don't see them a lot, but I know that the English Bulldogs have wrinkles. And I think the Frenchies have some wrinkles around their head too. So my rule is with the wrinkles is you just want to make these look like they're deeper by adding a darker color. This area is obviously pushing up because it's lighter, and then this area is the shadow. And once this dries, I would go in again. Let's see if it'll work. It's probably too wet, but then I would add just even a darker, that's actually a little too dark, but even a darker shadow to really emphasize the depth. All right. And just to reiterate, when we do a shiny coat, we want to leave the areas where there's shine. You can squint your eyes and easily see that in a photo of your dog. Then for the multicolor, I work wet on wet and I drop in some color. And now since it's dry, I would come in and maybe just add a little bit more of those spots, depending what my dog's fur looks like. And then some of the brown down here as well. Working wet on wet, it gives us that soft fur look. Then the long hair coat, we just do those beautiful lines. And remember, sometimes I press my brush down so it's a little thicker, and sometimes I just use the top of my brush so it's nice and thin. We have our curly coat, our little half moon shapes, and then we blend a little bit. And our wrinkly coat is just building on those little wrinkles and adding shadows where we need to.